you know, I don't know if I would have had the energy for it because I
Mhm.
was so tired just from even my voice hurt just from all that. Hey, hello, hello. I mean, it
I
was just,
believe
I can't even do it anymore, which is maybe nice that I can't
it.
do my customer service voice anymore.
But it's so real. It's like
Mhm.
it's tiring because you're holding back. It takes a lot of energy to hold back a piece of you, you know? And that's exactly what we were doing. We're
Mhm.
holding back like some of the biggest parts of us so that we can be palatable, so we can be acceptable.
Hey, I'm Teen Zekas.
And hey, I'm Ileka Follett. We are business owners and moms with corporate backgrounds, and we are all about getting Black women paid in both corporate and business.
And you're listening to the Getting Black Women Paid podcast.
Let's go.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Getting Black Women Paid podcast. Today, we are talking about code switching.
Yeah.
This is a huge topic, especially for Black women in the workplace, Black women entrepreneurs. Um, just one, the necessity, act, and skill of code switching, and two, the impact that it has
Mhm.
on us who are being told to bring your whole self to work, except that your whole self is not actually welcome at work, etc. So I'm excited to dig into this topic with you, Ileka. I guess let's start with, you know, what has your own experience been with code switching in the workplace?
Yeah. So, well, first, for if y'all don't know us, really quickly, because this might be someone's first episode watching or
Oh, right.
listening.
Let's get into it. Yes.
So I'm Ileka Follett. I'm mom of four, and I am 20-year veteran in corporate America as a business strategist. Moved over and became an entrepreneur in the wellness area, and moved back into business strategy as an entrepreneur. So my experience around code switching is in both spaces, right? So really quickly, I grew up in an area where my family and the family across the street were the only Black kids at our whole school, right? So that was me from first grade all the way uh, to about seventh grade, and then there were a few more Black kids trickled in, and then I went ninth grade. When I went to high school, we had a few more, but we were still only about 1 to 2% Black kids at the entire school, right?
Wow.
And so I learned to code switch so well that I thought it was my regular voice. It was because I went to church, and when I went to a Black church, so I'd be in school and basketball and all the things all day in my school, all white kids. All our friends were white. We had a couple of Black friends, and that was it. And then I'd go to church and I'd be like, hey, what's going on, y'all? Oh my goodness. And I'm talking regular with my cousins and our other people at our church. And then I go to school, hey guys, Ileka. Oh my goodness, what? That happened? Oh my gosh, right? And so
Yep. Yep.
constant back and forth, and I didn't even know I did it, right? And then I went to college, and I went to HBCU, North Carolina A&T, Aggie Pride. And so when I got there, I walked in. I remember the first day of orientation, and the friends I met on day one are still some of my closest friends to this day.
Oh, I love that.
Yes. And they still make fun of me for that first meeting that we were in where we were all introducing ourselves, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm Ileka and I'm from Syracuse and da, da, da," and I'm just telling my story, and and I think I felt like everybody stopped and was just like, "Why is she talking like this?" Like, is that how she talks? Like they couldn't even grasp what was happening.
Right.
For me, mentally, it was like when I get into this space that's business or school, I have to talk like this. When we walk outside of school, I can be regular Alika again. You know,
Mhm.
I mean, even like if you notice, my voice goes up an octave. Hey guys, da-da-da,
Yep. Yep.
and then goes back to me. And it's
Mhm.
so wild because we start learning it as a child. That's how wild it is, especially if you grew up in an area that everybody is white but you. It's
Right.
like, well, I've got to sound like them. I can't sound like me. with my deeper voice and my, different octave and, they're going to know, right?
Wow, that's so wild. And then you just associate that with school and business and not with, I'm blending into this white situation.
Exactly. Mhm.
Wow. Well, I will do a brief introduction of myself as well. So I'm Teen Zekas. I started out my career as a high school math teacher, and I made a pivot into engineering. Um, Through the course of working as an engineer, I doubled my teaching salary and then went on to triple it. And now I help other Black women do the same. And for me, code switching goes back to childhood as well. I grew up biracial. I'm the daughter of a Nigerian immigrant and a white woman. And I grew up in a town that's very diverse. In fact, largely my parents moved here because there are other interracial families.
Mm.
And when I say here, I mean because I moved back too, so my kids would know other biracial kids, right? So, so I came back home. So, for me, growing up, especially with a Nigerian dad, I didn't necessarily resonate with the African American experience as
Mhm.
a kid. Um,
Makes sense.
and growing up, it was mostly other children of immigrants that I would be like, oh yeah, I know I couldn't say that in front of my dad, and you kind of have that immediate connection.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got to college that I realized that that was a really that was a divide there.
Mhm.
I was at a I went to Washington University in St. Louis,
Mm.
and I was on a Black scholarship, and my other co-scholars, my family,
Mm.
we all met for certain reasons, but they weren't my social group. And I realized that like all the Black kids were hanging out together, and I was hanging out with like the choir nerds. and 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 for me, I don't think it was until after college that I really started to live into my blackness in terms of my like Black American experience, and really started to form those connections, especially with other Black women, where you can even tell a portion of a story and the other one's already like, yep, I've been there, I already know what you're talking. You don't even have to finish that sentence, right? So
Right.
and so now I crave that and I seek that. And
Mhm.
I do find when I'm talking with other Black women is when I'm the most myself, right?
Mhm.
And I don't have to do the explaining or the, just yeah, you don't explain yourself. And so it's been interesting because my code switching experience has been, I grew up it, I mean, I won't say I grew up white. My Nigerian cousins would say I'm white.
Right. Well, my
But
black cousins used to call me white too, so
well, right. But like, so I grew up thinking of being an other, right? So
yeah,
in a white
100%.
context, I was Black.
Mhm.
In a Black context, I was white. I was always just not a fit. And
Right.
so part of the code switching was to fit in, right? Was to
Mhm.
to be like,
Yeah.
I'm not as different as it seems, right?
Yeah.
And even
Mhm.
when I talk with other Africans, I get this like pseudo African accent that just kind of comes out, right? Like, because you're just kind of reflecting what they're
Yeah.
doing. And so in fact, I dated a guy, a Kenyan, and
Mhm.
at one point I mentioned, I was like, this
Mhm.
isn't how I normally speak, and he was really upset. Like, well, I need to know how you normally talk. So I told him a story in my Chicago accent, and he didn't
Mhm.
understand a word I said. I was going too fast, and what he was like, I have no idea what you're even saying. And so
That's
we
hilarious.
adjust for different situations.
Mhm.
But I think the piece that has really caught my attention recently is with this whole the somewhat recent push for equity and belonging and
Mm.
inclusion in the workplace, and then this whole, oh, we're a family, bring your whole self to work. And Black women are always like, I know you don't mean that.
Right, exactly.
You know how I know you don't mean that, because every time I tell you anything, you got something to say about my tone,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
If I have
Mhm.
a different idea or I disagree with something, you're going to talk about I'm combative or I'm whatever. You are
I'm
hearing
aggressive.
me differently than you're
Mhm.
hearing other people. So I can't just come in there talking how I talk.
100%. Yep. And it's funny because going into corporate America, I leaned in heavy. And it was tough for me because even though I grew up in an all white area, when I went to college, I went to an HBCU, and my parents were very intentional about me specifically going to an HBCU because
Hmm.
my sisters didn't code switch as much as I did. Like, well, no, I can't even say it. Like they code switched, but they code switched. I was switched. I wasn't even code. There was no code. I was like, I thought this is who I was.
Right. They would dip it in when they needed to, and you were just
I was
submerged.
always in.
Yep.
and so so my parents were I remember my parents were intentional. They wanted my older sister went to an HBCU, but they really wanted me to go to HBCU because they needed me to see the Black experience and see it
Right.
in a different way. And so when I got there, now I went from this basically what they called Oreo at the time. We've all heard it, right?
Yep.
From the Oreo, hey guys, da-da-da, right? And my family called me that, not in my immediate family, but like cousins and stuff
Yep.
like that, right? So I went from there to, I'm at an HBCU, so I'm all the way in, I'm, hey, what's going on? And I'm talking like me. And then I went to corporate, and now I'm the only Black person in the room again.
Yep.
And I immediately switch back, right? It's like, I
That's
look at it
a
like this,
survival instinct.
right? It is. I look at it like this. When I went to Italy for the first time, right? I'm in it. Oh no, it was France. Sorry. When I went to France for the first time, I'm in France. I'm walking around, and someone starts speaking to me in French, and I immediately responded back in Spanish, right? Because I responded back in
Your
the
brain is
only
just
other language
in
I
foreign
knew.
language mode, even if it's not the right one. I've done
And
that.
that's and it's the same concept when it comes to code switching. Like I walked into these white boardrooms,
Yep.
and I'm like, gotta switch, right? And so I walked down the hall as me, open the door, and now I am Ileka the code switch.
Yep.
I am walking in a completely different person, speaking a different way. And honestly, it took away from some of what I had to offer, because if I
Mm,
can't fully be me, then I'm not going to be able to give everything that I give what I have in order to, take things to the
right.
next level. So
And it's
it's not,
exhausting because
it
it's not even just corporate. I worked at the Container Store, which
is.
was a
Yeah.
very wealthy area,
Mhm.
a bunch of like rich
Yep.
white ladies, and I needed
Mhm.
to be non-threatening. My customer service voice was a lot like what you were talking about. I go
Yeah.
up an octave, like, "Oh,
Yeah.
good morning," blah blah blah, and I tell the same bad jokes, and
Mhm.
but I was working so hard to
Yeah.
be palatable to these people,
Exactly.
and it was exhausting.
Mhm.
And
It is.
it's and I cannot imagine if I was trying to do work that involved creativity, generating ideas.
Right.
I don't know if I would have had the energy for it because I
Mhm.
was so tired just from even my voice hurt just from all that. Hey, hello, blah, blah. I mean, it
I
was
believe
just I can't even do it anymore, which is maybe nice that I can't
it.
do my customer service voice anymore.
But it's so real. It's like
Mhm.
it's tiring because you're holding back. It takes a lot of energy to hold back a piece of you. And that's exactly what we were doing. We're
Mm.
holding back like some of the biggest parts of us so that we can be palatable, so we can be acceptable,
The way you
you know?
described that, I just thought of. I mean, I hadn't thought about it this before, but it's a lot like being in the closet.
Ooh.
So I am bi, and
Mhm.
um, and since I'm married to a man, it like doesn't come up as much,
Yeah.
in a professional setting. I'm not going to be
Like,
like, right.
oh.
It's not really relevant, like who I'm into, but um, but you know, of my gay and lesbian friends, who I've talked to, like times where they've been out at work versus times when they've been in the closet,
Mm,
they're a totally different person, right? That
yeah.
they're trying to edge their I had someone who would talk about, oh, my better half does this and whatever, without saying, my
Oh, yeah.
boyfriend or my husband, right? Like, and
Mhm.
just the effort you're putting into, like, oh, well, should I walk this way? Should I stand this way? Is someone going to think
Mm.
something? I mean, it's just
Yeah. Mhm.
exhausting
It
to
is.
have a part of you, that you are not just, leaving back or holding out, but hiding. You're hiding
Right.
that part of you. And so you're
Mhm.
constantly working to shield it. Let me make sure I didn't let my black out too much
Right.
when someone said something,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Yep. And sure, I'm not, walking in a certain kind of way or sitting in a certain kind of way. I have to ensure that my hair is done a certain way. Like for me, I mean, obviously I kept a perm, that whole time.
We got to
But
do a whole episode about hair
yeah, I know, 'cause
as well.
exactly, because it's a whole thing. And it's like we're stepping in saying, okay, they're not going to pay me as much if I'm speaking like this versus speaking like this. Hey guys, da-da-da. Oh, you know what? That doesn't really work. It doesn't even sound right coming from me now, right? But it's like, but what's even crazier is that when I left corporate, I mean, I was still code switching, right? And so when I left corporate and came into the entrepreneurial world, um, I remember doing YouTube videos. And if anybody goes back and watches some of my first YouTube videos, you can see I was still code switching.
Wow.
And yeah, and I
For an
remember,
invisible audience,
right,
it was
just
still this
automatic,
need. Wow.
natural, right? It was a natural thing. This is a business. It's what I'm doing. And so I have to speak this certain way. And I remember my husband was outside I think I was making a video in the office and he was outside listening. And when I got out, he's like, "Why are you talking like that?" And I was like, I
Oh, that's
was like,
what's wild, having someone in the other part of your life hearing you switch and being like, "Who is that?"
right, exactly. And I was like, well, and he's like, well, you're doing your work voice for YouTube. I don't understand why you're doing your work voice for YouTube. Because he was okay with me doing it at work because this is just what we did. This is what
Of
we
course.
all grew up doing. He
Yeah.
has a work voice. My sisters all have work voices. This is what we do, right?
Mm.
But hearing me do it for YouTube, he's like, this was so enlightening for me because he literally said, didn't you come out of that for a reason? Why do you have to stop being you in what you've created? And I was like, oh, like, dagger, right? It
Yeah.
just felt like, whoa. And it was like a dagger, but it was also like a freedom. And it helped me. I had to really look at, why am I still code switching?
Mm.
Like, what do I think it's going to bring me? What's the benefits? Is there some fear associated with it? Like, why am I doing it?
Right.
And
Am I trying to make
once,
people comfortable who are not my audience, not my people?
exactly, like, what is the reason?
Mm.
And what I realized is that I was doing it partially, one, because it was normal.
Mm.
At that point, it was normal for me to do it in business. I'd done it for so long, so that's what I'm supposed to do.
Yep.
Two, I realized I was doing it because I felt like if they saw the real me, then this business would never grow.
Mm.
There was a bit of that, right?
Right.
Because
Imposter
that's
syndrome.
what I've been, imposter syndrome. That's literally the first thing I thought about. It's because that's what we step into. That's what we're always told, essentially, right?
Right.
And
Success
so,
is white. You're gonna have to sound white if
exactly.
you're gonna be educated. You're gonna have to sound
Mhm.
white if you're gonna be successful.
If they're gonna pay you, if you're gonna get paid the way you want to be paid, you've got to sound white.
Mm.
And so what I love is that we're doing this episode. I love that we're doing this episode because what we get to say and show in this episode is, here's something I'm going to say from a business standpoint. The moment I stopped code switching is when I started having my best years.
Mm.
So I started YouTube in 2017, right? And started coaching in 2018. In 2021, I stopped code switching. I think it
Mm.
was 2020, maybe 2020. I probably just got sick of being in the house and was like, I'm just going to talk like me. I don't know. So it's either 2020 or 2021. But my business literally grew so much more. And I stepped into me and my confidence
And
and
your authenticity.
exactly in such a bigger way
Mhm.
when I started speaking like me and no longer like, hey guys, no longer like this. It's Ileka. So like that went away.
Yeah.
And that was a game changer. And so when we're looking at, getting Black women paid, I'm wondering if some of what could be holding us back is us holding ourselves back, thinking that we have to be palatable and speak
Mm.
like them in
Mm.
order to achieve at that next level.
Mm. And well, and I love that you're coming at this from the entrepreneurial perspective, right? And
Mhm.
people want someone who's authentic, right? People don't want some fake,
Right.
show, and you can tell when someone's putting on a mask. I wonder, for our listeners who are in the corporate world who
Mhm.
are still, who are working for somebody else,
Mhm.
what the advice is, because it might still be beneficial to code switch in that situation. I think
Mm.
um, one thing I would challenge folks to do is to try to see whether there's room for who you really are in that organization, or to see
Mhm.
whether there is an organization out there
Ooh.
that is ready for who you really are. And
Mhm.
if you find that there isn't, then maybe the answer is to move into entrepreneurship, or to
Mm.
work for if you don't have that entrepreneurial spirit, maybe you're going to work for another Black woman who is running her own business, or things that
Mhm.
we need to figure out whether we can be ourselves in these spaces, and ask why not if we
Yeah,
can. And
exactly.
then if we really haven't found a place where we can do it, then we got to go.
100%. And that's the other thing. I think that one thing that because code switching is such a big topic, and so we didn't dive into everything, but one thing I do want to highlight is that code switching it doesn't necessarily mean speaking uneducated, because I think that's what is like leaned into a lot, right?
Mm,
It's like I'm still educated and I still sound educated, but I just do it in my regular voice versus, versus
mhm. You're not
higher.
you're not pretending to be a soprano while you're
Right, exactly. I get to still sound like me and use words that I would normally use
right. And
versus.
so part of it is combating those stereotypes, right? That it's not the choices are not sound white or sound dumb or ghetto or whatever
Right,
the things are that people are going to associate with
black.
Blackness.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Because it's not.
Black is educated, Black is
Mhm,
excellent, Black is
exactly.
entrepreneurial, successful, all of those things.
Mhm,
And so the more that we show up in that way,
mhm.
the more other people can see it, right? And then you don't have to, maybe the next person doesn't have to get on YouTube thinking, well, I can only be successful if I sound white. Because I've
Right,
seen my leader
and
doing it.
exactly, and furthermore, white doesn't necessarily mean educated, great sou sound.
Right,
It
right. On
doesn't
the other
mean.
side of things, right.
Right. Exactly. It doesn't mean all the things that, I was called an Oreo for as a kid. Like, that's not what white is, right?
Right.
It's like we get to look at it as, speaking, um, I guess, proper enough English, right?
Mm,
That doesn't have to be that's not white or black. That's just talking, right?
yeah.
And we get to look at what that sounds like. And it's funny that it gets associated like that.
Mm. Well, and I'll say one more thing, which is that there is still a level of code switching that is authentic, right?
Mhm.
We might use different kinds of phrases when we're talking to one of our friends
Mhm.
than
Exactly.
when we're talking to our mom,
Mhm.
or and both
Yeah.
of those can be really us, right?
Yeah.
And so
Exactly.
for me, like, I think that kind of pseudo African accent I get when I'm talking to my aunties, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, because I can communicate better with them when I'm doing that, and
Right.
so there is some level of, we have empathy, and we reflect,
Mhm.
who we're talking to, but to be aware of, where your authentic self is,
Yeah.
and ensure that you're not losing that, and you're not actively hiding it to be
Mhm.
accepted by the people you're talking to.
I love that because it's I really like that because that's so true. It's like, just because even when I look at, I mean, you made a really good point. When I'm speaking to like my mom, right?
Mhm.
I'm probably not gonna say curse words to my mother or my grandmother. I'm probably not gonna use curse
Right.
words or
And that's not because you're not being authentically you.
exactly.
There's
I'm not gonna say that in front of my mother. Or I may not talk about sex or,
Mhm.
like something I might talk with my best friend about. I may not use those same phrases, same conversations in conversation with like my grandmother, or my
Mhm.
great aunt, right? It's like
Right,
so.
but that is very different than when I
Mhm.
walk into the office, I put on a mask, and I wear that mask all day before I
Exactly.
go home. That's a different thing, and
Precisely.
that's what I'm hoping we can inspire some Black women to let go of.
Yes, I love that. So I'm sure we'll have another episode on code switching because I know there's so many deeper areas to get into, and we try and keep these episodes to roughly around 20 minutes. So, so we don't want to take it too far, but yeah. keep watching as we're really going to be talking on topics that align with Black women, align with getting Black women paid, because that's really important to both of us. Tine has an entire book around imposter syndrome, and then she has. Go ahead, you got the book today?
Got it.
Yes. Right?
Available
Like,
on Amazon. Overcoming
mhm.
imposter syndrome at work. The Black Woman's Guide to Conquer Perfectionism, Stop Overthinking, and Thrive in Your Career.
Exactly. And this is about getting Black women paid. So that is what we're gonna be using different topics around that we are leaning into, and that really go with getting Black women paid. That's either impacting our money in some way or another, and how we get to talk to that, and different perspectives on it from a corporate side, and from a business side, and overall from a Black woman and mom standpoint as well.
Right.
How do those things align? So thank you all for joining us today. We've had a wonderful time with you. Continue to follow us, subscribe to our channel and to our podcast. We're on YouTube, and we'll be on all the other podcast stations. I guess that's what they're called.
Platforms, or I don't know.
Platforms. Yes, platforms. We'll be on all the podcast platforms. So please subscribe, continue to follow us, and we're excited to bring more topics that are aligned with getting Black women paid. All right. We'll see y'all later.
Hey, thanks for watching the Getting Black Women Paid podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, make sure you like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can catch more episodes like this one.
And join the conversation by leaving a comment below. Be sure to share this channel with incredible Black women in your life so we can continue getting Black women paid.
All right. We'll see you in the next one.